Proud supporters of Africa this week. Engine, with us, you are number one.
Welcome back to Africa This Week. As hunger spreads among more than 12 million people in the Horn of Africa, a study by the International Livestock Research Institute of the response to Kenya's last devastating drought in 2008 and 2009 finds that investments aimed at increasing the mobility of livestock herders could be the key to averting future food crises in arid lands. Dr. Andrew Mude, project leader of index-based livestock insurance program at the International Livestock Research Institute, explained.
The drought is hitting areas in which the pastoral livelihood is the key livelihood, and where livestock is a key asset. So in terms of livelihoods, the impact of drought is felt mostly on livestock, and we have, like for example, in northern Kenya already in areas 10 to 20, some areas upwards of 30% of the livestock herd already perishing, and we still have about 2 more months before any expected rains.
This has raised the debate as to whether or not we should be encouraging people to be pastoral farmers, or we should be encouraging them to move into conventional agriculture and crop farming. What's your view?
Well, my view is that we need to remain with investments and increase our investments in the pastoral livelihood. It's got to be noted that pastoralism is a system that has evolved to ensure optimality of the resources in the area. The Greater Horn of Africa, which is in which the drought is being experienced, is 80% arid and semi-arid land. So before you think of moving to crop-based agriculture, you've got to think of some of the investments that are necessary for crops, heavy investments in water, heavy investments in roads, and so on. But as the situation is, already we have up to, in Kenya, it's estimated about $800 million is the value of the livestock kept in pastoral systems. It's also an important source, the key source of meats that is consumed in the East African region. 90% of the meat comes from that area. So it's very important to actually increase the investments to do 2 things. It's you see, the situation with drought creates livestock mortality, but livestock mortality can be taken care of with various different interventions. One of the key ones that we're working on right now is providing insurance. It's important to note that livestock is the critical and most productive asset in this area.
Right.
In other parts of the world, where you have any threats or potential risks to productive assets, what do people do?
Right.
They insure them, whether it's your health as your productive asset, or it's your vehicle, or your house, or your business, or so on. So we started looking at methods to increase the resilience of these populations to drought by insuring them against the loss of this kind of risk.
How do you value a cow, Andrew? I mean, that's a very simple question, but it's a question that many insurers would be asking.
Well, it's there are many ways to value it, but the way that would work for a commercial entity would be to look at the market value. I mean, these livestock that are kept in this system, they are markets. They could be improved in their functionality, but the way we and our commercial partners who are offering this insurance product value them is looking at the market value of 1 cow. Right now, 1 cow in northern Kenya would probably be worth about $200, 15,000 Kenya shillings. This is a bit on the lower side due to the emaciation resulting from the drought conditions.
As with projects of national significance, Kenya's Vision 2030 boasts several defining features to measure progress. Mugo Kibati is the CEO of Kenya Vision 2030.
Lots been done. As we discussed last time, Vision 2030 has a number of components. It's a very comprehensive program with an economic, political, social pillar, and the infrastructure programs. And I think what is most obvious to everybody is the political pillar. We're just 1 day to 2 days away from celebrating our 1-year anniversary since we promulgated the new constitution. And since that constitution was passed on August 27th of last year, we've seen a lot of reforms in the judiciary and the police force, excuse me, and electoral processes. We today are speaking about a completely new Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, right. Supreme Court in the works. So the political pillar, I think, is moving very well. Infrastructure, we've seen a lot in terms of roads and highways across the entire country. electrification of rural areas in this country, fiber optics across the entire country. And now as we move into the future, we're looking at one of the largest projects, I think, in the continent, which is a Lamu Transport and Economic Corridor, which has 7 components: a port, a railway line, which is about 2,000 kilometers connecting us, Kenya, East Africa, to Ethiopia and South Sudan, a highway doing the same thing, 3 resort cities, 3 airports, a pipeline between Juba and Lamu Port. So that is what we want to move into in the next few years, and we're determined to break ground on Lamu Port in the next 6 or so months.
All right, so infrastructure, a huge component, and a lot of work being done on the rail and the road side. Which other areas are going to be a central focus of the economic pillar of this Vision 2030? We know that Kenya is a major tourism economy. What are you doing to boost tourism growth, tourism jobs, and the profile of Kenya?
Well, as we speak, we just released our half-year results today on tourism, and we've done much better than last year. We've grown about 20% from last year. But really, we have significant programs in the tourism sector. We want, first of all, to ensure that what we consider to be our premium parks, the famous Masai Mara, the Amboseli, Lake Nakuru, are all treated as premium parks, meaning that more spend per tourist to those parks. We've also tried to open up more of the unknown parks in this country. There are various parks across the entire country that are not normally visited. We've done a lot of branding and refurbishing of these parks across the entire country. But also we're talking about a new convention center. We want to put up a brand new convention center at the coast in Mombasa. We've secured the land. We're just about to start the final design program for that. As Jeff told you about the Lamu Corridor. The Lamu Corridor includes 3 resort cities. Brand new resort cities, 1 at the coast, Lamu itself, 1 in central Kenya, Isiolo is right at the center of the country, and 1 on Lake Turkana. Right. And we now have preliminary designs for all those 3 resort cities. As we speak next week, we shall be going to Isiolo to start to look at securing land to begin on the Isiolo Resort City. So across the board, tourism is a major focus for Vision 2030.
More than 16.4 million U.S. immigrants come from countries that are expected to experience higher economic growth than the United States. And there is a greater potential for returns for those willing to invest in their home countries. Eric Gishard, the founder and CEO of Homestrings, explained their investment model.
Homestrings.com is in fact a web-based portal which is designed exclusively for qualified investors who are interested in looking for investment opportunities, vetted investment opportunities on the African continent. It is essentially based out of my own frustration as a member of the diaspora, my father being from Guinea, my mother being American, and also having worked at the World Bank for 6 years in trying to take advantage of the Africa growth story that I read about every day, but unfortunately not finding opportunities to actually participate. And it turns out that I wasn't the only one in that same situation. According to the World Bank, there are about 23 million diaspora members, Africans living outside of the continent, with savings of about $35 billion, much of which is in liquid form, and clearly could be used for investment and for participating in the financing of development.
Yeah. When you engage with members of the diaspora, what is it that they're looking for? Because we know that on average, something like $40 billion US comes back into sub-Saharan Africa and other emerging markets from the diaspora. But the frustration is that a lot of that money is used for consumption. It's not productive capital for investment.
Well, we actually believe that the bulk of those flows, $40 billion a year, which actually grows at about 15% per annum, that a portion of those is actually seeking investment opportunities on the continent. Unfortunately, the experience of the diaspora, the African diaspora, has been somewhat dismal. Either they are taken up by Ponzi scheme and scams, or they unfortunately have to expend a lot of money when they send funds to their families in order to invest on their behalf. And I'm sure you understand that experience. And so what we're trying to do at Homestrings is essentially provide a structured environment in which members of the diaspora can comfortably seek opportunities, have the tools to conduct due diligence on investment opportunities, and then make a decision about where they want to place their funds, whether they want to invest in healthcare, whether they want to invest in infrastructure, whether they want to invest in diaspora bonds or other types of investment opportunities.
A long-awaited UN report recently estimated that Nigeria's Ogoniland region could take 30 years to recover fully from the damage caused by years of oil spills. Peter Igabo, CEO of Nigeria's National Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency, explained Nigeria's spill management program.
We've seen the report, and the federal government is currently studying it. We'll look at it and make recommendations to the government. Very soon we expect that the white paper on the issue will come up, and the issue of 1 billion naira, well, we'll look at it and have our own estimates too.
How do you see the problem of the oil industry and the ecological degradation in Nigeria? Apparently it's been a problem since Nigerian independence, since Nigeria discovered that it was an oil producer, and very little has been done to try to address that problem.
Yes, one of the issues that is really going on is that of having a very strong institutional framework, to regulate the oil industry with reference to oil spills. The National Oil Detection and Response Agency was set up in 2006 by the federal government to address this issue. And I think we're trying to see how we can create a stronger framework to carry on. And generally, it has been a problem of duplication of functions with some sister agencies, and then the oil companies do capitalize on that, and we don't know really who's responsible for the regulatory functions.
Right. I mean, just a report recently looking at this litigation that's taking place in London regarding Shell. Just to give you an example, 9 oil spillages in the last 3 weeks alone. 9 oil spillages in Ikarama in 3 weeks alone. So if you calibrate it in terms of the last 30 or so years of oil production, it's a very, very serious problem. And many people living in the Niger Delta will tell you that they can barely drink the water because of the contamination that exists. And some of the socio-political problems have really been as a result of the oil spillage problems. How urgently are you addressing these issues?
The issues are certainly going to be addressed over time. And yes, the incidence of oil spills in the region is getting really high. Oil exploration activities has been going on since the late 50s. That's over 50 years. And apart from, other social, effects resulting from anthropogenic factors, we also see that some of the pipelines need to be replaced. The average lifespan of a pipeline it's about 20-25 years, and yet we are not having that, response from the operators, in replacing some of their pipelines. So we have equipment failure coming in as a factor, in some of the recent ones that you just talked about. Some of them actually as a result of equipment failure or human error.
Although Africa is endowed with fossil and renewable energy resources which could more than adequately cover its energy needs, it remains the most poorly electrified continent in the world. Ashley Evans spoke to Frost & Sullivan Senior Energy and Power Systems Analyst Ross Bruton about energy as a mega trend.
Well, at the moment, Africa is still quite in its initial stages of renewable energy development. For the past 2 decades, renewable energy has been quite a high growth technology within the global perspective. However, Africa's only really caught on, particularly Southern Africa, over the last few years. North Africa, the market's a little bit more mature in respect to the rest of the continent. However, South Africa finally has started to get a bit of traction in the development of a renewable power market within its own countries. Other smaller countries and developments that are ongoing within the rest of Africa is more located to a bit on the east side, and then a few developments within Nigeria.
Now, what megatrends are most relevant to Africa? I know that there are a lot of them, but can you touch on a few of them?
Within the African context, the megatrends that we'll be covering in this document that you're referring to, it's called the African megatrend, the top 8 African megatrends that are going ahead from 2010 to 2020. Now, the key megatrends that we'll be looking at there is really relating to urbanization, regional integration of the continent, looking into such things such as renewable energy, as you spoke about, particular innovation, especially with regards to raw material beneficiation. Taking a look at more trends such as your future infrastructure that's being developed within the continent, how that infrastructure is going to affect particular business models that are going to be developed. Once using those business models in this future infrastructure, now how do we feed the continent? We're a growing population, and with economic growth expected and being experienced quite robustly in many African economies, how are we going to keep up with that growth with regards to food supply? These are the kind of megatrends that we're really kind of targeting within this megatrend document.
Now, we rely on 90% carbon power. What are the major drivers that are driving this renewable power development?
Within South Africa, you have to look at it in the context of either Africa or within South Africa. Within Africa, it's really from a position of security of supply. Within Central Africa and within Eastern African regions, the primary energy source within those particular regions has traditionally been hydropower. They've been focusing a little into geothermal power in the east, particularly within Kenya. However, the large majority of those particular regions is still powered by hydropower. Now, the diversification of these areas' generation mixes away from that of a singular energy source that, due to such things as droughts, could be unreliable, is one key factor that's driving it. Secondly, there's a lot more available funding out there at the moment globally for clean energy initiatives, particularly within developing economies such as Africa. So the access to funding is really important within Africa, particularly consisting of nations that don't necessarily have their own funding and their own capital, governments or financial institutions, to invest into these kind of projects. Within South Africa, as you mentioned, 90% focused on coal power. The COP17 agreements that we agreed to in Copenhagen a few years back is very important. Our emission reductions by 2020 and those targets that are set by government is also a key factor that's been driving. And then, of course, for both South Africa and Africa, the potential for job creation, the potential for localization mechanisms, and bolstering of those national economies.
Well, that's all for this edition of Africa This Week. Join us again next week for another roundup of the top stories in Africa. From me, Mashudu Masuta, and the team, it's goodbye.